The house was strangely quiet as I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. Because my husband was away on a business trip for 3 days, leaving me alone with our daughter, Nana. I missed him, of course, but it felt nice to have some mother-daughter time. As I stirred the pot, I couldn't help but smile, thinking of how adorable Nana looked in the little purple dress I had helped her put on earlier. She had insisted on wearing it all day, twirling around the living room, her laughter echoing through the house. The smell of food filled the air, and I began setting the table, calling out to Nana. "Dinner's ready, sweetheart." I waited for her usual response, a cheerful,
"Coming, Mommy."
but was met with silence. Strange. Nana was always quick to come when food was involved. I called out again, a little louder this time, but there was still no answer. Wiping my hands on a towel, I headed upstairs to her room, assuming she had fallen asleep. As I approached the door, I noticed a strange stillness in the air, an unnatural quiet that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Pushing the door of Nana's room open, I tried to flick on the light switch, but the room remained dark. "Nana," I called softly, stepping into the room. A shiver ran down my spine as I noticed something odd. There were several dolls in the room that I hadn't seen before. They sat on the bed, the dresser, and even the floor, their glassy eyes reflecting the dim light. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized them. These were the same dolls I used to play with as a child, the ones I had forgotten about after all these years. How did they get here? Before I could process the unsettling sight, a voice broke the silence.
"Mommy, it's tea time."
The words were barely a whisper, but they sent a chill down my spine. I turned toward the sound and saw Nana sitting at her small tea table, her back facing me. She was perfectly still, her little hands resting on the table in front of her. "Nana, are you okay, sweetie?" I asked, my voice trembling. Something about her posture was wrong, too rigid, too unnatural. As I took a step closer, I noticed that the dolls were now positioned in a circle around her, their lifeless eyes fixed on me. I hesitated, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I reached out to touch Nana's shoulder, but as soon as my fingers brushed her skin, she collapsed onto the floor like a rag doll. What was going on with my Nana? I was shocked as I saw her face. Half of the skin was missing, revealing muscle and tissue. Her nails had been ripped off, leaving her tiny fingers bloody and raw. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. But before I could react, I heard it again. That soft, chilling voice.
"Mom, it's tea time."
I spun around, my eyes wide with terror. There was no one there, just the dolls sitting motionless, yet I could feel their presence, their eyes boring into me. I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was I losing my mind? Was this some twisted nightmare? Then I saw it. From the shadows, a doll began to move. It was the headless one. It was dressed in a miniature version of the same purple dress Nana had been wearing. The doll's tiny hands clutched a tea tray as it glided toward me, moving with an unnatural grace.
"Why did you leave me, Mommy?"
The voice was childlike, but it held a dark, sinister undertone. The doll stopped in front of me, raising its tray as if offering me a cup of tea. I staggered back, shaking my head in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. I tried to scream, to call for help, but no sound came out. The dolls closed in, surrounding me, their tiny hands reaching out, grasping at my clothes, pulling me down. I kicked and struggled, but their grip was iron strong, unyielding.
"Mom, don't you want to play with me?"
The headless doll asked, its voice now coming from all directions, echoing inside my skull. I felt cold metal press against my thigh, and I looked down in horror to see another doll holding a small, sharp knife, its eyes glinting with malice. The knife plunged into my leg, the pain searing through my body. I screamed, thrashing wildly, but the dolls pinned me down, their weight crushing, suffocating. They dragged me toward the tea table, forcing me to sit in the tiny chair. The headless doll climbed onto the table, its small hands meticulously arranging the tea set. More disgusting, it took one of Nana's nails, bloodied and torn, and carefully placed it on its own tiny finger, as if completing itself with pieces of my daughter. I sobbed, my mind fracturing under the relentless terror. "Please, just let me go." But the dolls only smiled, their expressions twisted into cruel mockeries of joy.
Tea time, Mommy. Tea time, Mommy. Tea time, Mommy.
They chorused in unison, their voices blending into a cacophony of madness. Just when I thought the nightmare couldn't get worse, my eyes wide with terror and saw two dolls approaching, carrying a tray between them. On the tray sat a head, my old doll's head, the one I had played with as a child. But it was no longer the pristine, beautiful doll I remembered. The head was rotted, the skin cracked and peeled, one eye missing, the other milky white. The two dolls placed the tray beside the headless doll's body, their movements eerily synchronized. I watched in horror as they lifted the decayed head and attached it to the body, twisting it grotesquely until it clicked into place. For a moment, everything was still. Then slowly the head began to turn. The doll's mouth cracked open, and in a raspy, distorted voice, it whispered,
Welcome back, Mommy.
I woke up at 4 a.m. thirsty. As I shuffled toward the kitchen, I noticed a light spilling out from Ethan's room. It was strange. Ethan was usually a deep sleeper. I paused outside his door, worried by the unusual glow. As I peered inside, I saw my son standing motionless by the window. "Ethan?" I whispered, trying to rouse him. He didn't turn around or notice me. Instead, he continued to stare out into the dark night. Suddenly, he turned to me and said, "It's time." His voice was a chill ran down my spine. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just a dream or a minor disturbance. I walked back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The strange words echoed in my mind. "It's time." What did that even mean? The following night, I decided to keep a closer watch. As the clock struck 4:13 a.m., Ethan was once again standing by the window, his silhouette as a ghostly figure against the night. I was about to approach him when I heard it, a soft, deliberate knock on the front door. My heart raced as I hurried downstairs, but when I opened the door, there was no one there, just an empty porch in the moonlight. The next morning, I questioned Ethan about the odd occurrences. He looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and claimed no memory of getting up during the night. It was unsettling, but I had to admit that children often have peculiar dreams. Night after night, the routine persisted. At 4:13 a.m., Ethan would stand by the window and the knocking on the door would start. Each time I'd rush to check, only to find nothing but silence. Exhaustion wore me down, and I started dreading 4:13 a.m. One cold night at exactly 4:13 a.m., as I watched from the doorway, Ethan raised his small hand and pressed it against the window. I froze when I saw a hand on the other side, mirroring his. The fingers were long, skeletal, and blackened with decay. The skin was pale and waxy, like someone who had been submerged in water for too long. Panic surged through me. I reached out to pull Ethan away, but he collapsed in convulsions. I scooped him up, cradling him in my arms as the room filled with a chilling, familiar, distorted voice.
We can be together again.
It was Marie's voice, my wife who had died a year ago. Marie had suffered from a rare autoimmune disorder that made her body decay while she was still alive. I carried Ethan downstairs, my heart pounding with fear and confusion. At the foot of the stairs stood Marie, or what looked like her. Her skin was rotting, her eyes sunken, and she wore the dress we buried her in. Her limbs stretched and twisted in unnatural ways. It was her, yet it wasn't. Her mouth twisted into an eerily grin.
I've come to take our son home.
No! I screamed, clutching Ethan closer. You're not taking him! Desperation clawed at me as I fled back upstairs, Ethan in my arms. I slammed the door shut and hid by the bed, my heart pounding. Ethan, barely able to speak, said in a trembling voice, "Daddy, Mummy always comes at 4:13 and wants us to be a family again." My mind was spinning. I accidentally looked up and saw a photo of 3 of us hugging each other. April 13th, the day Marie died. How had I not realized it before? Fear seeped into my bones as the door exploded open. Marie's twisted form slithered through the bed, her eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light.
Found you!
She hissed, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. In a desperate attempt, I opened the window to climb over to the roof, trying to escape the house. The air was frigid, and a feeling of hopelessness washed over me. "Ethan! We need to go! Now!" I shouted, pulling him close. But as I turned to climb, Ethan's small hand clung to mine. "Daddy, no! I want to be with Mummy!" My heart broke. "Ethan, listen to me! That's not your mother! We need to get out of here!" Ethan's grip tightened, his eyes filled with longing and fear. "Please, Daddy! I miss her!" Before I could argue further, the temperature in the room plummeted. Marie's grotesque figure emerged from the shadows, her smile twisted into something both horrifying and triumphant.
Ethan! Come to Mommy!
She crooned, her voice full of malice. Ethan's eyes lit up with a mix of fear and longing. He began to move towards Marie, and I felt a pang of despair. "No!" I screamed, pulling Ethan back with all my strength. "Stay with me!" But Ethan broke free from my grasp, running into Marie's cold, outstretched arms. She embraced him, her face contorted in a sickening smile of victory. Marie's limbs wrapped around us, pulling us both into her icy, hard grip. The window, once a beacon of escape, now sealed us in with Marie's chilling embrace. The last thing I remember was Ethan's terrified face turned calm, his eyes locked on me with a mix of love and fear. And now, we're a family again. We got the distress signal at 3 a.m. It woke me from a deep sleep, the shrill beeping echoing in my ears. Bobby, Kim, and I stumbled to the control room where the radio was flashing urgently.
"Distress signal from a yacht?
Bobby said, his voice tense.
Registered to a Daniel Owens. No other information."
"All right," I said, adrenaline kicking in. "Let's gear up." By 3:10 a.m., we were cutting across the waves in our rescue boat, surrounded by the darkness of the ocean. The only light came from our headlamp, piercing the pitch-black night. The weather was clear, but I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to Daniel and his friends, since it had been a long time since we'd received an SOS without a storm.
Who knows with these rich folks?
Kim said.
They do all kinds of weird stuff.
The ocean loomed ahead of us, pure darkness in every direction. I glanced back, seeing the lights from the dock getting smaller and smaller, eventually swallowed by the void. We reached the yacht by 3:20 a.m. It was a massive vessel, about 50 or 60 feet long, reflecting eerily in the inky black water. Bobby shifted gears and we pulled up alongside it, slowly, quietly. Bobby grabbed the megaphone.
U.S. Coast Guard.
He called out.
Can you hear us?
Silence. Kim and I started with the rope securing our boat to the yacht. As we worked, I kept glancing up at the yacht. I didn't see any damage to the boat or people in the water. Kim boarded first. I followed while Bobby stayed in our boat, preparing to search the surrounding water. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. The doors opened into a small but lavishly decorated room. To the right, a bar area stood, and to the left a dining area with tables and booths. The tables were set with food as if people had just been there moments before. Glasses of champagne still bubbling. A fillet of salmon, a few bites missing. Lipstick smeared on a napkin. I looked at my watch. 3:25 a.m. They'd sent the SOS not even 20 minutes ago. How did they go from eating and drinking to just nothing? Kim walked over, her face pale.
I checked below deck, no one's there.
The food's still warm, I said, my voice shaky. Her eyes widened.
What the hell? Where did they go?
I suggested to check the top deck. We made our way to the stairs, moving cautiously. The top deck was open to the air. I glanced at the captain's chair, the steering wheel, and the little U-shaped sofa behind them. It was empty. They're not here, that's for sure. They've got to be in the water. I looked out over the railing, into the black water below. I turned, looking around the boat, scanning the water. My heart stopped. Where's Bobby? Our boat was still linked with the yacht, but it was empty.
He must have boarded.
Kim snapped, charging for the stairs.
He never follows protocol. I always tell him it's going to get someone killed, but no, he just has to do things his way.
Her rant grew muffled as she descended towards the deck. I followed her, but Bobby wasn't downstairs. He wasn't in the dining area or in either of the bedrooms below deck. I checked tiny closets that couldn't possibly fit a person. Then opened the storage cabins that held the life jackets. Bobby, where are you? A hand clamped over my mouth. Something shoved me to the floor. I tried to wrestle away, but then I saw a flash of red curls above me. Kim. She was dragging me under the table, whispering, begging me to keep quiet. Shh. Squelch. Both of us froze. I slightly glanced up. Bobby was standing there in the center of the room, but something was horribly wrong with him. He was soaking wet from head to toe. Seawater sloshed in his boots. Streams of water ran off his sleeves. His face was pale and sickly, with his forehead swollen unnaturally, almost sagging downwards. And his eyes, they were pure white, pupilless, blank. Squelch. Bobby took another step. Squelch. And another. Kim's nails dug into my arm. We watched as Bobby, no, not Bobby, not anymore, continued walking towards us. I held my breath, shutting my eyes. Please don't let him see us. Please. Squelch. 2 rubber boots, right in front of our table. Squelch. He continued deeper into the cabin. I let out the breath I was holding. Kim's grip on my arm loosened. As soon as Bobby's steps sounded on the stairs, Kim whispered to me,
Run!
I didn't want to, but then she shoved me hard and I was rolling out from under the table. I scrambled up just in time to see Bobby freeze on the stairs. He slowly turned around, his white eyes locking on mine. I ran, faster than I'd run in my life. We scrambled out onto the deck, then made our way into the boat as fast as we could. Kim made it first. Then she grabbed my hand, pulling me towards safety. Squelch. Bobby's hand locked onto my ankle, except they weren't just hands. His fingers were jointless like tentacles wrapping perfectly around my ankle, covered in fleshy suction cups. And his face, it was rapidly changing. Before my eyes, his flesh twisted and bloated into different forms, until I saw a woman, then an older man. This is how I die. But then a massive wave crashed over us, flipping the boat 90 degrees, and everything fell into the sea. back home, I was so relieved, so thankful. Whatever that thing was, I'd escaped it. I felt better than I had in years. Like all my problems were tiny grains of sand, but now I'm not so sure.